Alright, so in today's video, I am going to tell you how to eliminate the rat smell in your reptile room. Let me tell you, if you're breeding snakes and you bring in rats as a food source and you start breeding rats, let me tell you, these rats can really stink up the place, especially if you're not really trying to figure out how to eliminate the smells. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people breeding rats. They say the only option is to have ventilation to the outside to actually move all the air out because you can't control it. Let me tell you, that is not true. As a matter of fact, I pretty much have zero smell in my reptile room from these rats until maybe a day or two before cleaning, and I can start to smell them a little bit. And other than that, it's almost virtually scent free in my reptile room and my whole house. The only time I really have a really bad smell, for example, if I'm upstairs and I walk in the front door and I smell a rat, that means I have a dead rat somewhere in one of these racks. And sometimes I have rats that die from old age. I usually feed my older ones to my big reticulated pythons. I have some big 60-pound reticulated pythons that pretty much use up all my old retired breeder rats, and all my smaller ones I feed to the ball pythons, but I got my retics just to kind of get rid of the older rats. And sometimes I don't catch them in time and they just expire of old age and they pass away in the tubs. As a matter of fact, just a couple weeks ago, I could smell it upstairs and I was like, man, I got a dead rat. So I went through and I pulled the dead rat, and later on that day I came down here, I'm like, man, it still stinks in here, what's going on? And sure enough, I had a second dead rat, 2 in one day. I mean, that's really unusual. I've never seen that before. It's usually, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 per year that I actually have a dead rodent in these racks. So today I'm going to go through and I'm going to tell you exactly how to eliminate all the smells from the rats in your reptile room. And I actually have 2 ARS racks, really professional racks that were really expensive, and I'd say I'd have hundreds of rats in these 2 racks here. And I'm going to kind of go through step by step exactly how to get rid of the smells. And number 1 is the bedding. The bedding is essential. I'd say the bedding is probably the number 1 most important thing to consider when it comes to cutting smells in your rat room. And when I first started, I tried like a cypress mulch, and I went back and forth with a bunch of different things. I went to like a pine pellet. And the problem with the pellets is the rats really don't like to walk on them, and they're real noisy, all the pellets rolling around in there. Then I didn't really like the pellets. And then I went to like a shredded pine. And the interesting thing about shredded pine is you really need the right pine, because pine is essentially toxic to rats. It'll give them liver failure is what it does. And there's different degrees of toxicity when it comes to pine. So when I first started out, I thought pine was the greatest thing, and I put it through all, and it smells really good. And as a matter of fact, it's toxic to you too. You don't want to breathe in that good smelling pine smell. Believe it or not, it's not good for your liver to breathe in all those. It's actually a toxin. So what I did is I actually filled all my racks with the pine shavings, and a few weeks later I started having rats die off. Every single day I had a dead rat, and I was just pulling them out one by one. I thought, what in the world's going on? And I was treating with antibiotics and like multiple antibiotics in the water and the food and everything. And at one point I was actually considering of just getting rid of all the rats in my whole colony, sterilizing everything, and starting over with a new batch of rats, because I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what was going on. Come to find out, it was actually my pine bedding that was toxic. That kind of floored me. And then I started going to other things. I started going to shredded paper, and the shredded paper at the time, I was working at an office job, and we had a lot of shredded paper, and it was free. I thought it was great. The only problem is it doesn't cut down on smells. And you go through and replace all the shredded paper, and 2 days later it starts stinking up the place again. You almost have to like chase the shredded paper because it just doesn't last that long. And then I found this breeder down in Denver that was breeding rats in a pet store, and I'm like, man, I'm just struggling. I can't find the perfect substrate. I'm going through, the pine is toxic, the shredded paper. He's like, oh no, take a look at this. And it was actually a kiln dried, dust-free pine, and he said he's been using it for like 30 years. He actually gave me the name of the pet store down in Denver that he buys it at, and sure enough, this guy goes through like multiple pallets of this stuff every single week, And I'm not sure if you can buy it online. I haven't seen it anywhere. It's pretty much Colorado based a product, so it's here in Colorado, and I'll show you that product later on in the video. But I started using that and it was fantastic. Let me tell you, I haven't had a single rat die from the toxicity of the pine since I started using, and I've been using that, I'd say, for probably a year and a half with virtually 0 deaths in my whole rat collection. The only time that I have a death is either they die of old age, or it's a female that that is pregnant, giving birth. Usually in the process of giving birth, that's usually when I lose some rats. It's pretty unfortunate. So I'd say the bedding is the #1 thing. And the #2 thing is an air filter. It's essential you have an air filter. Now, speaking of the air, so for example, if you took all the air in this room and you vented it outside, especially in a cold climate like here in Colorado, you have to bring in more air, some fresh air from somewhere else in the house, and then you have to heat that air. And let me tell you, heating air and venting it to the outside is super expensive. You're better off going with air filters and something else, you know, instead of trying to heat the air and then vent it outside. And that's kind of been my approach. So I'm going to show you my air filter. I'm going to put it up on the table and kind of tear it apart, show you how I modified it to clean the air. All right, so this is the air cleaner. It's basically just a box fan air cleaner, and it's really kind of getting old. I don't even think they make this model anymore. And you can actually pull the front open, and it comes with this this basically, it's like a they call it a HEPA-like filter. It's not HEPA, and I don't think you really want HEPA filters. I have actually tried the HEPA filters, and the problem is it reduces the airflow too much, and you want something that's pleated, and this is kind of like a fabric kind of a material, and actually it's supposed to be bright white. This one's really dirty. I actually vacuumed it, but actually it's time to replace all these, so I made an order and I'm getting a new filter. It's basically the Hunter replacement filter 30931, and what it is it sits in here like this. This is really the way it's designed. And then what I did is I went online and I found this carbon impregnated fiber, and some of it comes in rolls. This comes in a big folded, really large mat, and I cut them to size, and what I did is I put 2 of them together, and it fits right inside of this right here. So I have 2 carbon impregnated mats right here, and then what I do is I just kind of pop them right in there. And then what I do is I have 2 more right here, and then when I turn the fan on, I put them right here, and it sucks it basically right to the fan, and then I can see if it's getting dirty or not. And when this starts getting dirty, what I do is I just take it off and I vacuum it. And these have been lasting for months and months, and you can actually smell them, and they still smell like a really fresh carbon. And the thing is just keep all the dust off them. These rats are really dusty, and I think mainly it's from the dust from the food, because when you pour in the food and you're pouring in the bedding and you're making dust, I think that's where it comes from, mostly the bedding and the food dust as you're filling the feeders. I don't think it's really like rat hair or anything, but it captures everything on there, and then I just kind of vacuum that. And then what I do is I put a little space heater in front of this, point it right at this, so the heat goes from here straight up in here, and it circulates around the entire room. And then on the space heater, I actually have that connected to a thermostat to turn it on and off to dial in the right temperature. But that, let me tell you, this carbon air filter is what you want. You definitely want this carbon. You want something to move the air, and that, I would say, cuts down virtually all the smell that, you know, especially right before you're starting to clean, right before the tubs are kind of wearing out, all the pine's kind of wearing out. This is kind of like the last resort. Really fine polishes the air. All right, so here are what my rodent racks look like. Pretty much I have 2 rows of mice on the top, and then I have rats over here, and all these over here are rats. One thing about the mice is you definitely want to keep a minimum number of males, because one male mouse will stink worse than the whole rack of rats. So I'd say I probably have, you know, just a few males. Keep the population really low too. as far as the male mice. So over here is pretty much where I have my air filter, and it's really noisy. I usually turn it off for the videos. So I have my heater over here, and it's actually controlled with a, I actually used a jump start thermostat for a while, and it's too much for the jump start. I burned it out, and the jump start just kind of monitors the temperature of the room here, but I use this greenhouse thermostat for controlling the temperature of the space heater. The space heater goes into the air filter and then moves the air just around. And then over here in my dusty corner, this is also essential. This is a little kind of an air freshener, like a Wix. They're refillable. Let me tell you, you can put some really nice smelling scents in there, and that really makes a huge difference to cut the smells down. All right, so I kind of want to show you the worst of the worst. This is 2 days past cleaning day. This is about as bad as my rats get, and you can see the tub's getting a little dirty, but the pine really does a good job. You just see a little bit down the bottom. It really absorbs all the odors and all the mess and everything, and the rats are really happy. And what I usually do is pretty much the maximum population that I have in the tubs is 1 male to 4 females. I try not to go too much above that, because keep in mind, once they have babies, and then the babies will be all over the place, and then you want to cycle out the babies as they produce them. So you actually want to feed them off or sell them to the pet store, or somehow somehow get rid of the babies. So, and I think it's really good for the rats to actually have a lot of room. You don't really want to cram a whole bunch of rats in a tub. Look at this rat, he's so funny. I think rats are really cool, and they're really friendly. You know, I actually have never been bitten by a rat, and they're really cool animals. And the only time they're not cool is when I get out and they're running around the room. Usually they stay in the tubs pretty good though. So here's one more suggestion. If you're breeding mice are a little bit different than rats. So if you actually take rats, you can put a whole bunch of males in a tub and they won't fight at all. Versus if you have mice, I actually tried this once and tried to have a male tub with a bunch of male mice together. Let me tell you, it doesn't work the same as rats. Those mice will fight really, really bad. And for some reason, when mice fight, they release the males, they release some kind of a pheromone that's really strong. I actually went to the pet store once and got some mice, and they had, I think I only had like 2 or 3 males at the time when I was just starting out, and I needed some live mice. And actually, I was bringing them home in my truck, and I had them in the cab, and I think I only had like 3 male mice, and they smelled so bad I actually had to pull over, put them in the back of the truck for the rest of the trip home because they were just unbelievably stinky. Let me tell you, if you have male mice that start fighting, they will stink up the whole house. So pretty much the general rule is keep 1 male with a bunch of females per tub, and as a matter of fact, it's probably best if you kind of stretched out the females. You know, I like to put a bunch of females with a male, and as they get pregnant, move those females to other tubs to keep your number of male mice to a minimum. It's completely different than rats. I almost got onto mice for a while, and then I realized my ball python hatchlings, they absolutely needed mice, and then I kind of kept my 2 rows of mice. I'm not going to get any more mice because of how stinky they are. Let me tell you, rats are a lot less stinkier than mice. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.